Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
Can say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem.
April 17th, 1970. A date etched in history. The entire nation was gripped with excitement, but also paralyzing fear. As the families and loved ones of the 3 astronauts on board the Apollo 13 mission, with tear-soaked faces, read their silent prayers, the mission's status remained unclear. But how come the Apollo 13 mission took an unexpected turn when 2 earlier missions of the Apollo program had been successful? Why was the crew desperately clinging to their dear lives? What threatened them? And now that all contact was lost, did they make it? Today, we will reveal to you some incredible new insights that never made it to the public, shared by an Apollo astronaut who unveiled the terrible truth about the Apollo 13 mission. Don't miss it, as this will change how we think about space exploration forever. It all began in 1970, when Apollo 13 lifted off from Earth with a crew of 3 on board, all brimming with the dream of setting foot on the moon. Since this was only a year after Neil Armstrong's historic moonwalk, their ambition was not all too far-fetched. NASA had already successfully sent 2 missions to the moon before this one. Logic promised success with this 3rd mission as well. Logic was such a liar. To make any sense of this historic launch, we must travel over a decade back in time. The space race emerged as a key theater of the Cold War rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. Both competing superpowers sought to demonstrate their scientific and technological prowess, and the launch of the Soviet satellite Sputnik 1 on October 4, 1957, marked the beginning of the space age. This was the first artificial satellite to orbit the Earth, and the USSR's success shocked the United States and led to a sense of urgency. The United States quickly responded with the creation of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, in 1958 to spearhead the country's space exploration efforts. NASA's initial missions, such as the Mercury and Gemini programs, aimed to develop the technology and expertise required for human spaceflight. In the meantime, the USSR was making bold strides in space, and on April 12, 1961, Soviet astronaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human to journey into space and orbit the Earth aboard the Vostok 1 spacecraft. In response to this remarkable series of Soviet achievements, U.S. President John F. Kennedy delivered a historic speech on May 25, 1961, where he set a bold goal for the United States. His words echo today just as fresh as they did when he first said them. I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. This was the start of the Apollo program. NASA's Apollo program was a series of missions designed to fulfill President Kennedy's vision of putting an American man on the moon before the close of the decade. The Apollo program consisted of a series of crewed missions, starting from Apollo 1, and each mission built upon the knowledge and experience gained from its predecessors. The Apollo 1 mission was scheduled for January 27, 1967, as the inaugural crewed mission of the Apollo program. Its primary goal was to test the spacecraft's systems in low Earth orbit. However, tragedy struck during a pre-launch test when there was a cabin fire resulting in the deaths of astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger B. Chaffee. This fire was caused by an electrical fault in the pure oxygen atmosphere inside the spacecraft. However, the USA and NASA remained just as motivated as they were earlier. The accident was thoroughly investigated, and the findings led to significant safety improvements in the program. Many other unmanned missions followed, but on October 11, 1968, NASA launched its first successful manned mission, Apollo 7. This marked the return of the Apollo program to crewed missions. The mission's primary objective was to test the Apollo Command and Service Modules, CSM, in Earth's orbit. It successfully completed all its objectives, ensuring the viability of the CSM for future lunar missions. Later that same year, in December 1968, Apollo 8 made history by becoming the first crewed mission to orbit the moon. While its original goal included testing the lunar module, or LM, in lunar orbit, The LM was not yet ready, so the mission focused on lunar orbit and Earth observations instead. This mission marked humanity's first journey beyond low Earth orbit. Further encouraged by their recent successes, NASA pulled another ambitious shot on March 3, 1969, with the Apollo 9 mission, aiming to test the lunar module in Earth's orbit. The mission successfully executed various maneuvers to demonstrate the LM's readiness for future lunar missions, including separation, rendezvous, and docking with the command module. Only 2 months later, NASA conducted what is often called a dress rehearsal for the moon landing. The Apollo 10 mission took place from May 18, 26, 1969. Its mission was to thoroughly test all lunar landing procedures without actually landing on the moon. The lunar module descended to within 15 kilometers of the lunar surface, and this set the groundwork for Apollo 11's historic lunar landing. And then came the moment of truth. On July 20, 1969, the Apollo 11 mission, carrying astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, successfully landed on the moon, making the duo the first humans to ever do so. Their colleague Michael Collins was orbiting above while this happened. This mission was the apex of the USA's space race endeavors, and the first time that the West had clearly bested their rivals on the other side of the Iron Curtain, and not by a small margin. This marked an iconic moment in human history. Following up on this success, the Apollo 12 mission, conducted from November 14, 1969, worked on precision lunar landings. It targeted the Surveyor 3 spacecraft, which had landed on the moon in 1967. Astronauts Charles Pete Conrad and Alan L. Bean achieved a pinpoint landing near Surveyor 3, conducted experiments, and collected lunar samples. However, the interest of the common man was already waning. While Apollo 11 had around 7 million on-ground spectators and 600 million television viewers, no more than 200,000 people bothered to show up for the Apollo 13 launch. While the television audience was still substantial, one thing was becoming clear. This mission had not attracted a similar level of public attention yet. Landing on the moon was already old news. The Apollo program's hype was clearly going downhill. But NASA remained firm with its commitment and made ready for the 7th crewed mission in the Apollo space program, Apollo 13. This was intended to be the 3rd mission to land on the moon. However, today, it is remembered for a whole different reason. The mission was crewed by Commander James A. Lovell Jr., Command Module Pilot John L. Swigert Jr., and Lunar Module Pilot Fred W. Hayes. Junior Apollo 13 took to the skies after a successful launch from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida on April 11, 1970, at 13:13 Eastern Standard Time. The Apollo 13 spacecraft consisted of 4 main components. The command module was the primary part of the spacecraft, housing the astronauts and essential equipment. Next up, the service module hosted the oxygen supply, engines, fuel cells for electricity generation, and other vital systems. The third part was the lunar module, which was intended to detach from the command module, descend to the moon's surface, and later reattach. The fourth component was the launch escape system, which was a safety feature designed to eject the astronauts safely from the rocket in case of a launch accident. The mission objectives were clear: to land the crew on the moon, conduct studies of the lunar surface, and return the crew safely back home. The men on board Apollo 13 were brimming with excitement over the prospect of following in the footsteps of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. But nothing would turn out the way they thought. Approximately 56 hours into the mission, on April 13, 1970, during a routine check of the service module, the crew heard a deafening bang. Alarms blared, warning lights illuminated, and panic ensued. The astronauts realized that one of the oxygen tanks had ruptured, and the other was rapidly leaking. They later recounted how they saw one of the oxygen tanks leaking with their own eyes through the window of the command module. Having witnessed the life-threatening emergency, Commander James Lovell radioed back home. His famous words have forever etched this moment into history. "Houston, we've had a problem here." When briefed about the situation, the ground control's initial reaction was that of shock. They initially thought of a sensor malfunction, but soon enough it became apparent. This was no sensor malfunction. An oxygen tank in the spacecraft had indeed been compromised and put the crew in a life-threatening situation. The mission was immediately aborted, and the lunar landing was canceled. But there was a not-so-small problem. By this time, the mission was already 330,000 kilometers from Earth. The remaining objectives then shifted to safely return the crew to Earth, using the lunar module as a lifeboat. To ensure the safe return of the crew, the NASA ground staff began assisting the spacecraft crew in conducting critical mid-course corrections to ensure a safe re-entry trajectory. But there were a ton of challenges to overcome, such as limited power, water, and other essential resources. But before we dive deeper into the fate of the astronauts, let's take a closer look at the source of the emergency itself and how big a deal it was. The service module of the Apollo 13 spacecraft housed various critical systems, including electrical power, propulsion, and life support equipment. It also housed 2 oxygen tanks, which were part of the spacecraft's life support system. These tanks contained highly volatile oxygen and hydrogen used for breathing and generating electricity via fuel cells. Of these, Tank 2, the one that exploded, had a history of issues. During ground testing, the crew accidentally dropped it, causing damage to an internal stirring fan and an electrical insulation panel. However, NASA believed that the tank was safe for flight, as it had passed various tests and inspections. The explosion was triggered by a combination of factors. While the spacecraft was en route to the moon, the astronauts were instructed to stir the cryogenic tanks. This was part of the routine procedure. The stirring was intended to prevent the settling of liquid oxygen, which could cause uneven pressure and lead to potential issues. But as soon as the stirring was initiated, the damaged wiring inside Tank 2 caused an electrical fault. This ignited a fire, leading to a loud explosion. The explosion resulted in a sudden loss of electrical power in the command module. It also damaged the spacecraft's propulsion system, thus putting the crew on a deviated course. The service module, where the explosion occurred, had to be jettisoned to prevent further damage to the command module. The mission now faced several immediate challenges, including a critical shortage of electrical power and oxygen. To conserve power, the crew was instructed to shut down all non-essential systems, including the guidance computer and heaters in the command module, Odyssey. The on-flight oxygen levels were carefully monitored, and the crew had to adapt by breathing from the lunar module's stores. The lunar module, named Aquarius, thus became the astronauts' primary means of survival. It had its own power supply, life support systems, and propulsion, but this was far from ideal. The lunar module was only designed to support 2 astronauts for approximately 45 hours. But for the remainder of the mission, these 3 brave men had to stay in there to survive. Another problem arose soon enough. Carbon dioxide levels began to rise as the CO2 scrubbers in the command module were not compatible with the lunar module. This put the survival of the entire crew on the line. The ground staff guided the crew and helped them come up with a makeshift contraption to stabilize the CO2 levels in the LM. This was no small feat, as the astronauts used stuff like plastic bags, cardboard, suit hoses, and duct tape for this purpose. Working with these materials, they improvised a makeshift adapter to connect the square lithium hydroxide canisters from the command module to the round openings in the LM's environmental control system. This allowed the LM's carbon dioxide removal system to use the canisters from the CM. This improvised solution helped reduce the rising carbon dioxide levels in the LM and ensured that the astronauts had a sufficient supply of breathable air. As noted earlier, the explosion had affected the spacecraft's trajectory. Astronauts, Jim Lovell, Fred Hayes, and Jack Swigert, had to rely on the lunar module's descent engine for course corrections. The crew had to conduct a critical engine burn using the lunar module's descent engine to adjust the trajectory for a free return trajectory around the moon. But there was a problem. The lunar module had never been intended for this type of engine burn, and there were concerns about its ability to perform this task. Nevertheless, the ground staff conducted a series of calculations to affirm that it could be done, and the onboard crew did just that. The engine burn lasted just over 4 minutes, but allowed the crew to correct their course. They now had to take the long way around the moon, and essentially slingshot the spacecraft towards the Earth on a free return trajectory. With 3 astronauts on board the lunar module with limited supplies of oxygen, water, and electrical power, the extended journey back to Earth was not going to be easy. To conserve these resources, the crew had to make do with minimal lighting, reduced water intake, and strict rationing of food. The lunar module had no internal heating system, and temperatures dropped dramatically in space. To make matters worse, the astronauts had to power down most of the systems to conserve energy, leading to a chilly and uncomfortable environment. The lunar module's windows froze over, making navigation and communication with Earth challenging. As per the ground staff's calculations, by the time the crew could reach ground levels, they'd have no more than 1 hour's worth of life support. The climax of the Apollo 13 mission reached its peak during re-entry, with the entire nation and the families of the astronauts gripped by the event. The service module, which had been jettisoned after the explosion, was released before re-entry, allowing the command module to enter Earth's atmosphere without it. The command module separated from the lunar module, which was intentionally directed to burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. As the spacecraft re-entered Earth's atmosphere, a communication blackout occurred due to ionization of the air, blocking radio waves. This was normal, and the ground staff expected a resumption of communications after 3 minutes. Those stressful 3 minutes elapsed. No contact. 10 seconds over, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 60 seconds. For around 4 minutes and 27 seconds, families of the crew and the nation anxiously awaited any sign of communication, uncertain about the fate of these brave men. Finally, when contact was re-established and the command module emerged from the blackout, relief and jubilation swept over the nation. Despite all odds, Apollo 13 had survived the most perilous phase of its journey. The command module splashed down safely in the South Pacific Ocean on April 17, 1970. The safe return of Apollo 13 was a testament to the exceptional teamwork and problem-solving skills of the astronauts and the ground control team. It became known as a successful failure because the intended moon landing was abandoned, but the crew returned safely. The long journey home of Apollo 13, as it is called today, remains one of the most dramatic and inspiring stories of space exploration, highlighting the determination of astronauts and mission control personnel when confronted with life-threatening challenges in the unforgiving space. The Apollo 13 mission had several significant impacts on future space exploration and NASA's approach to missions. However, amidst the legacy of Apollo's achievements, a veiled truth emerges. A story goes around that a once anonymous Apollo astronaut has broken silence, unveiling a shocking revelation: a clandestine conspiracy to sabotage Apollo 13. Their courageous admission sheds light on hidden political motivations that endangered the mission, forever altering our understanding of space exploration's darker depths. After the Apollo 13 incident, NASA conducted an extensive review of spacecraft systems and procedures. They made critical design improvements to enhance the safety and redundancy of systems to prevent similar accidents. The agency also implemented more rigorous testing and quality control measures to minimize the risk of technical failures on future missions. NASA also geared up its efforts to train astronauts to handle unexpected situations and foster a culture of resourcefulness. The collaboration between astronauts and mission control during Apollo 13 highlighted the importance of clear communication and trust. This experience contributed to NASA's commitment to effective communication protocols during missions. NASA also developed more robust risk management processes to identify and mitigate potential hazards in future missions. The agency adopted a more conservative approach when assessing mission risks and making decisions regarding mission safety. The use of the lunar module as a lifeboat during the crisis became a key aspect of mission planning for subsequent lunar missions. This ensured that, in the event of a similar catastrophe, astronauts had a viable means of returning to Earth. Lunar module lifeboat systems were upgraded and refined to extend their capabilities to make things comparatively less critical if something similar were to ever happen again. However, NASA did not inch back from their space ambitions. Despite the dramatic setback of Apollo 13's lunar landing cancellation, NASA continued the Apollo program, culminating in the successful Apollo 17 mission in 1972, the last mission in the program. The Apollo 13 mission and its successful failure also captured the public's imagination and garnered significant media attention. The space fever was back with all its might. The crew and the ground staff both demonstrated the resilience of the human spirit and the power of teamwork. And despite failing to achieve the original mission objectives, the Apollo 13 venture continues to inspire millions to pursue careers in STEM fields, contributing to lasting benefits for education and innovation. Thanks for watching. Don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.